Welcome to Pickspace AI Property Management Podcast. I'm Maor Cohen. I'm the founder and CEO of Pickspace, a smart property management software company that simplifies property management start to finish. And I'm here in each episode speak with industry leaders to gain and explore what's working, what's changing, and where the industry is headed. Let's jump into today's conversation with my guest, Cesar Carranza, Regional VP of California Operations. Cesar, thank you for joining us today. It's great having someone with your experience in the property management world on the show. Before we dive into the heart of the discussion, could you share a bit about your background and what brought you to current role at Rainey Property Management?
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for having me as your guest. I'm honored that you reached out to me. As you stated, my name is Cesar Carranza. I am currently the Regional VP with Rainey Property Management for California Operations. My career in the industry actually started a little bit of exposure as a child. My mom actually was a resident manager in LA County. And so when I was about 8 years old or so, I got early on exposure to the industry. My mom was managing 25 units. And at the end of my high school career, I was at a turning point, trying to decide, what do I do with my career? Where do I go? And it just so happened that there was an opportunity that came up as an administrative assistant with the management company that was over the property that my mom managed. So there was an opportunity to come in on board as an administrative assistant. And so not knowing where I wanted to do or what to explore, I jumped on the opportunity. And within the first year, I became a property supervisor and I actually ended up supervising my mom who was managing her property. So interestingly enough, I was still living at home. So she would joke that, while I was at home, she was the boss, but while I was at work, I was the boss. And she very much still is the boss. So that's the fun part. She's now retired. And, I really enjoyed growing up in the industry because even as I advanced in my roles, we still had that connection and she was able to reach out to me. I had newer employers and she would reach out to me for advice and some guidance. But as a junior, smaller, younger property supervisor, I gained some great exposure with homeowners association management, smaller multifamily, garden style apartments in LA County and some single family homes. From there, I made my move over to the Central Valley here in Bakersfield, California, around 2015, 2017 or so. And an opportunity presented itself for me to be an on-site property manager. At the time when I was looking to transition into the Central Valley, I was looking for a portfolio supervisor position, but there wasn't one available. However, acquiring this position as an on-site manager brought a lot of value because for those 4 years that I committed to being an on-site manager, I was able to gain hands-on site experience, right? And so that's something that I can now speak to and kind of relate to with the teams that I supervise. I can speak through those challenges and those curveballs that the day-to-day operators at the site level get. I can speak to a situation that I may have experienced that could, bring some value to the team. From there, I went over to a pretty larger Central Valley management firm, GSF Properties, and gained some valuable experience as a property supervisor, kind of more hands-on with some of financial reporting, budget analysis, forecasting, and really hands-on with supervisory roles, developing people, creating organizational culture, having an influence in organizational culture. That's a lot of the skills that I was able to pull away from GSF. From GSF, at that time, I was doing conventional multifamily, and the opportunity presented itself for me to go into a senior regional property manager role where I was overseeing portfolio supervisors with Win Residential on the affordable housing side. And, I gained some valuable experience the year and a half that I was there. And from there, an opportunity presented itself for me to then step into my current role, which is the regional vice president over California operations. And so I really am grateful for the opportunity that I've had at each and every industry role within property management because, I could speak to those that I lead, in the industry. I've had firsthand experience in every one of those roles, so I can actually guide my team through relevant experience that I had on site. My background, I actually had an undergrad degree in organizational development through University of Laverne. And that's actually a passion that I have. I identify myself as a transformational leader who really values connections and relationship building. That's the best way to really get to know your team members and to really hone in on what their needs are or what motivates them. just by building relationships and connections. From completing my undergrad degree, I then went into my MBA program, a master's in business administration with a concentration in organizational leadership. And that's where I kind of got into higher level leadership, skill building that I now implement and use at my current role.
Nice, very nice. Thank you for sharing us. And now we'll move into a little bit. I know you're involved in the last few years, particularly in terms of like scale, portfolio, internal processes. What are the biggest challenges that come with that kind of growth? And if I can also, and again, the next question is, what metrics or results do you care about most when you're evaluating the health and performance of the region?
Great question. So to start off, we live in a very challenging state. We operate in a very challenging state. It's very resident friendly and proactive. So that's a benefit to residents and also to some landlords, although it does come with its challenges. So you have to really be proactive with some of the litigation and changes in the law that occur, on a yearly basis. And so as a executive leadership role in California, I'm always kind of looking at the forecast ahead to see what potential laws could come into play that, requires to make some shifts in operations. So for example, we have this new picture reporting, right? So when a resident moves out, we're not required to provide them with pre-turnover photos and then post-repair photos, right? And so gathering that information, there's lots of value that comes from even having an association membership. So a lot of the times we lean on like California Apartment Association for some of like that educational side. So then that way we can obtain that information up front and then implement a policy around it and then push it out to our teams. So that's one of the things I've done. One of the measurements that I usually review in order to assess the health of the asset would be some KPIs, which are typically our delinquency, how long our turnover rates are, how long it's taking for a unit to get turned, for example, and also occupancy percentages. We have some great software that we use, property management software. Currently, we're using ResMan as a property management software, which is based out of Texas, but it's, our office is a corporate base in Texas, but we do operate in other states. And so we've utilized it here. It's a great software because it provides a great overall broad view of those KPIs for us. So we can dive in and look at metrics like how long a unit is sitting vacant, how long it's sitting for a make ready status. And then that kind of sounds the alarm for us, right? So if we have a vacant unit that's been sitting longer than 2 weeks, and we're having that conversation with the manager, with the maintenance staff, what are some of the delays we're experiencing here? Is it a lack of personnel? Is it a lack of supplies? Do we need to consider vendoring out at some point, right? We often try to kind of keep some of our repairs in-house and turnover in-house. But in some cases, we may have a slew of like large amount of vacant turns. And so it makes sense in those situations to then vendor out, right? So being able to look at great reports that kind of give us a broad view of where some of that, those constraints may be, allows us to really dive in and dig into what potential barriers there may be and what solutions we can implement.
And talking about that, looking at like rising interest rate, inflation, or other thing that might impact as well. How do you approach tenant retention, rent collection, lease ups, or in addition to that, also to batch two questions from a competitive standpoint? What are other operations do and that you keeps you up at night? And where do you think Rainey has the edge or needs to catch up?
Okay. So, the biggest revenue builder for us can be resident retention, right? There's no direct income that comes from that, but residents moving out, vacating, that creates an expense for us, right? And so we really want to try to throw as many resources as we can towards resident retention, right? So we really focus on the services side of things, right? So work orders coming in, how quickly are we attending to those needs? Do we have enough resources for those needs? Are work orders being completed within 24 hours? Is there a follow-up that's being done? Even something as much as a personal touch after an after hours emergency. We get a call from a resident after hours. There's a plumbing emergency. A resident manager picks up. They dispatch their maintenance techs. And then the following day, the resident manager is following up with the resident and checking in and saying, hey, I just wanted to follow up on that work order. How was the service? Is everything resolved? That really personalizes the experience and brings high value to the resident. because it's personalized. It's not just a one and done, right? So even doing things as far as like resident retention events, we usually do like a summer pool party or kickoff, right? And it gives us an opportunity to just gather as a community to really try to build that community, sense of community, and to really pour into our residents to show our appreciation for them, that they've chosen to be a part of the community, right? And we want to try to hold that and keep them. And so those are some of the ways that we can do that.
And let's do like a quick switch towards the technology, because you mentioned a few tools, maintenance requests, calls, even like the personal touch. But do you use any technology or software? You mentioned ResMan, but this is where things often get, interesting. So what platform, and you already mentioned, are you currently using to manage? And if there is more than one, so please share. And for operation, leasing, tenant engagement, maintenance, etc.
Yes. So the beauty of ResMan is that it's all encompassing, right? We do most of our operational tasks through there. We do supplement some of that with Doorcast, which is a maintenance system. We can complete inspection reports, generate work orders out of that. We've actually utilized Doorcast to satisfy that new photo requirement for California at their move out. So we really do try to integrate that. Technology is an amazing tool. It's ever evolving. I recall I think it was roughly 2015, 2017, around there, where leasing AI was the biggest thing, right? It's an opportunity for an immediate contact for a prospect to get a hold of somebody, whether that's an AI, right? A leasing tool. And it's very conversational, right? But it really alleviates some of that pressure from our on-site teams to be able to capture that prospect right off the bat, and then it integrates with the property management calendar, so it already automatically reviews availability, schedules an appointment via the leasing AI, and then we have a direct pipeline from the prospect to the manager, to set up a showing and to follow through on the showing. Technology can be very scary for some of our long-term employees, right? The ones that have been around for, 10 plus years, where technology is new, right? And so we want to be able to make sure that we're supporting our team members to actively, educate them on how to properly use the tools, to communicate the effectiveness of it. So then that way it's not so scary, but it's more of a like, oh, that's an impressive tool. We could really use that to streamline some of our processes, for example. But the main part of, utilizing AI in operations is that we want to make sure that we're not losing that humanistic side of it, right? Because it's all about connections, especially with resident retention. We can utilize these amazing tools, but we want to make sure that it's still personalized and that there's a human connection there as well.
100%. And sometimes, technology also fail, right? Like human beings, also technology is like not 100%. So where do those tools fall short? Are there any recurring, bottlenecks or frustrations your team face when using them, day to day? Or there is any, can you share some frustrations around the technology you're using?
Yeah, a lot of the data that we pull from our management software system is very human driven, right? So, for example, future move-in dates, right? So we have a prospect that's approved, a resident, the applicant has applied, they've been approved, we put a move-in date, right? And that requires a human entry, right? And so we coordinate move-ins, we coordinate resources for that move-in date, but that move-in date could easily be an error, right? It could be projected incorrectly. And then we have a past due move-in date. And so while AI tools or software tools can be very efficient, the amount of accuracy that's involved with with employees or managers entering manual entries needs to be completely accurate. And so we really are dependent on the level of involvement from our, employees that are entering the data. And so it does require constant oversight to make sure that what they're reporting is on time and it's accurate and it's projected accurately. So then that way, as we're pulling reports, pulling data, it reflects correctly. And those are some of the challenges. Is to make
100% agree. And we see it all the time. People are asking me, can you just add this feature so no one can manually add anything to the system? Like people wants the system to create the data, not people touching the system. And I totally understand. And I'm with you on that. But now let's actually dig a little bit more into it. And what are the most time consuming tasks your on-site or regional teams are constantly stuck repeating or manually managing?
So I would say financial reviews, variance reports, variance notes, checking for any reclasses or accruals, GL codes being incorrectly inputted. All that is very time consuming and it requires multiple levels of review, right? So it starts with the coding process. When you're doing your accounts payable, are they coding it correctly? If it's not coded correctly, then it makes it on the financial report and the manager has to review it to see if anything needs to be reclassed. And so that in itself is time consuming because you're reviewing line item by line item on all your GL codes to make sure it's coded correctly. And if it's not, then we got to get accounting involved. And then the regional has to review it. And then eventually, it goes to the higher level. And as an RVP, I'm doing my final review before it goes to the CEO for pushing out. So if there was some way to automate that, that would be an amazing accomplishment, I think, because it's very, very time consuming. And there's a lot of room for human error with that as well.
I agree. Tenant payments. We're going to dive into tenant payments, collection, challenges. So this is always like a hot topic, right? Because that's the money box. How do you currently collect rent? How do you make sure it's efficient? Are you using online payments? How tenant react to ACH, credit cards, the fees that entitled to all that? If you can share with us a little bit from your day.
Absolutely. So rent is due on the first, right? That's the biggest thing, right? There's a grace period and of course we're charging late fees, but it really depends on, the best performing property is one where there's a manager that's engaged early on, right? They're seeing the due date, it's on the first. They're posting those early payers, right? Because if you're sitting on those and then you have a ton of other rents coming in, you're going to have a lot of rents to post at once, right? So they're being proactive in the sense that they're posting early, right? And then by around the third or so, they're looking at their delinquency, right? They're making those phone calls. They're checking in to say, hey, this is just a gentle, friendly reminder that your rent was due on the first. On this date, depending on the lease, we're going to be charging a late fee. And not only that, but they're going into the system and they're logging the communication that they're having with the resident, right? Because at the regional level or, RVP level, we're then looking at our system and seeing there's a balance that's open here. What has the collection efforts been with the site team? Have they followed up with them? The most effective tool that we've found is human to human contact. Don't just rely on a phone call. Go door knocking, knock on their door. Get a hold of somebody in person. Have that conversation in person because a lot of the times people will see a phone ringing and they won't answer the phone. I want to backtrack a little bit here as far as like technology goes. One of the things that we're seeing is a lot of our systems have this great tool where we can easily send a text message to a prospect or send an email, right? Which can be effective, but in all reality, especially in emails platforms, people aren't always checking their emails, right? So while it's good to send general information, we always encourage our site teams to pick up the phone and call and make that person-to-person contact because people are not going to recognize a number that's being texted to them. People are not going to check their emails. They're going to spam it. And so the same rule can apply towards rent collection. Go in person, door knock, have that conversation. The best way that we can prevent a large delinquency balance is educating your residents on the consequences of what could happen if they don't. The last thing we want to do is pick somebody out and accrue legal expenses. We're in the business of housing people, right? And we want to try to retain them. And so the quicker an on-site manager can have that conversation with the resident, document it, follow up with them, the better the collection results will be and the better the tenant retention will be.
Tenant retention is a big thing. How do they react to 3-point-something% on top of their rent being charged by, online payments or additional dollars goes with their ACH bank transfer? Do you charge the tenants directly or you take it upon yourself?
So it is charged directly online, depending on their payments option. We also utilize a pay slip where they can print out a slip and take it to a participating partner. For those that prefer to get like a money order, right? Money orders typically cost like $3, right? Versus a pay slip that is generated through our online portal where it's like $1.50 a transaction. They can save the money, but still take the slip to the local participating partner, make the payment there, and it automatically hits their ledger. So there's a benefit to that too, and it's certified funds. You don't run the risk of a check sitting on a manager's desk or accidentally getting lost. So a lot of the times, residents prefer the security of an online portal or an online payment system. So then that way it's one and done. And there's no running risk of losing any transactions that way.
I
And of
understand.
course, managers, they prefer pushing online payments because it minimizes the task of having to scan multiple checks at once, right? If I had a property that has, 70, 80% online portal access and usage, then of course I'm only going to have 20% of checks to scan. That, first of the month or first week of the month, it's going to look a lot better.
And your company per se making any money on these processing fees or?
Not currently, no.
I understand. Okay. So now to our next topic. We're almost done, but we're moving nicely along the different topics. Contracts, right? We have managing contracts, vendors, compliance, but also contracts and rent agreement with the tenants themselves. How do you manage it today? Is it through DocuSign or through your system today, ResMan, or you use any other way, or even, manually PDFs and signing it manually?
Sure. So I would say it's both avenues, PDFs in most cases. However, we do utilize Blue Moon to generate our contracts, which integrates with our property management software. So Blue Moon is a great program we've utilized for years. It is integrated into ResMan. So when we go to that function where we want to convert the applicant into a resident, we can generate the lease directly from ResMan, but it's Blue Moon driven. And so the template is from Blue Moon, state specific. So it has all the California disclosures, addendums, those kind of things already included into it, embedded into it. And we can easily just send it to the resident then. But in some cases, we do have prospects or residents that are moving in that prefer paper copy. They prefer the one-on-one interaction where we're reviewing the contract with them.
They want to see the person, they want to sit, they want to sign.
Exactly.
On the paper. 100%. Yep. We see it all over. Looking ahead, maybe future looking and vision, as we look ahead on 2025 ends and 2026 and maybe 2030 is coming, what's your wish operational wise, capability wise? What do you wish that you'll make your job significantly easier over the next 2-3 years?
Gotcha. Well,
or even the next 12 months,
Yeah. Well, I would say that property management in 2025 is definitely undergoing a major identity shift. We're not just a rent collector or maintenance coordinator anymore. We're strategic operators, and that we're responsible for asset performance. And especially in a state like California, where we're constantly navigating regulatory changes, increased renter protections, and housing affordability challenges. Any kind of tool that can kind of help bring that in together, and kind of provide some in-depth market access for review and to try to look for some trends would be helpful. These changes that California brings every year, it really does force us to become more proactive and more data-driven, and the more focus on the long-term stability rather than, just short-term gains. That's the stance that we want to take. Another trend that we're seeing is a talent gap. The industry has struggled to attract and retain passionate professionals, especially post-pandemic. And that's why leadership development has become a personal mission for me specifically, supporting the growth of on-site staff into future leaders, just like somebody did for me. So if, there's any kind of like helpful tools that, kind of help bring in some industry insights and that we could utilize to help educate others, like that's the biggest value that I can bring to operations.
Cesar, thank you so much. This has been incredibly insightful. Before we wrap up, what advice would you give to other regional leaders trying to scale up high performance teams and portfolio in today's market?
Sure. I would say your biggest avenue for growth and retention, including those of your employees, is to make connections. Get to know your people on a personal level. I could speak to my first day on the job here at Rainey, right? I came into a position where I had the whole state to look after. And I really took the time before I even made that initial site visit to get to know the team profile. Who was my maintenance tech? Who was my assistant manager? Who was my property manager? What are their names? So when I showed up on site, I addressed them by the name. I already knew their name. I already knew their background, because that showed them that I'm there not just to check off a site visit, but to really get to know them. And in doing so, there's so much value that comes with that, because they can speak to the day-to-day challenges. They can speak to their passions that drive them. and you could feed into that and nourish that, and that'll bring so much value because then you have employees that buy into your vision, buy into the company's culture, and that don't want to leave, but they wanted to continue to produce and grow with you.
Beautifully said. And I think this is closing our episode for today. So this has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
For those who want to learn more about Rainey Property Management or contact with you, where the best place to do so?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give my email address here. It's C Carranza, CCARRANZA at Rainey, RAINEY, PM.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for joining us to Pickspace AI and Property Podcast. And thank you everyone for tuning in. If you found this insightful or helpful, please follow for more. And if you're ready to simplify your property management, visit pickspace.com. See you next time.